Welcome to The Explainer. When you look at the rapid, almost incomprehensible pace of modern biotechnology, it really feels like we're crossing new frontiers every single day. But today, we're going to be conducting a forensic audit of a completely unacknowledged frontier. We're unpacking a highly classified source text that outlines a pretty dark reality surrounding DARPA-funded genetic engineering, specifically operations supposedly taking place in offshore biosecurity labs. This audit details what it actually describes as the Archonic Endgame. We're going to take a very close look at the claims that entirely new, patented biological entities are being engineered right beneath our noses. Now, we constantly hear this reassurance, right? The public is told by academic bioethicists and government health agencies that this kind of extreme science, things like human cloning and severe transspecies gene editing, is strictly forbidden and tightly restricted by international law. But the source material we're digging into today argues that this is just a naive illusion. It draws a very hard line between the unclassified world, where regulations supposedly keep science in check, and the highly classified world, where those biological guardrails are entirely ignored to push the absolute limits of life itself. Here's our agenda for today as we peel back the layers of this source text. First, we'll look at the Chimera protocol, then the Salk Institute Beta Test, followed by following the DARPA money, engineering the Servitor class, and finally, the patent nightmare. All right, let's dive right into Section 1, the Chimera protocol and the unacknowledged biosecurity labs. So a chimera isn't just some fire-breathing monster from ancient Greek mythology. According to the clinical reality detailed in our text, it's an official term used heavily in the classified world of DARPA-funded gain-of-function research. Clinically speaking, a chimera is a single organism composed of cells with more than one distinct genotype, derived from two or more different zygotes. To put that simply, it basically means taking the foundational DNA blueprints from completely different species and forcing them together at the embryonic stage. It's an amalgamation that completely defies the natural laws of biology. The biological audit we're reviewing makes a truly staggering claim here. The architects behind these programs aren't crossing this ultimate biological red line just to cure genetic diseases or advance standard medicine, no. Instead, they are executing the Chimera protocol by physically splicing human and animal genetics with a very specific goal in mind: to manufacture a completely new class of subservient beings. They are allegedly engineering a highly specialized biological servitor class designed from the ground up for physical labor. Moving on to Section 2, the Salk Institute Beta Test. Let's take a look at the unclassified proof. You might think this sounds like pure science fiction. But back in April 2021, the global scientific community, led by researchers at the Salk Institute, published a landmark study in the journal Cell. They openly admitted to creating human macaque chimeric embryos. The process involved injecting human stem cells into macaque monkey embryos. But the absolutely crucial detail here is that they allowed those hybrid life forms to successfully grow in a laboratory setting for 20 days. Surviving for 20 days is a monumental leap in hybrid viability. It proves that the biological rejection mechanisms that usually prevent two entirely different species from fusing can, in fact, be bypassed. The audit uses this unclassified Salk Institute admission as its foundational anchor, forcing us to ask a deeply unsettling question. If this is the kind of transspecies gene editing they proudly publish in peer-reviewed journals, what kind of horrifying hybrid creations are already viable? What exactly is being incubated right now in deep underground, black-budget genetic labs? The text identifies these as subterranean level 4 facilities, like those allegedly located in places like Dulce, New Mexico. That brings us to Section 3, following the DARPA money and looking at the defense-wide receipts. To really understand the scale of this, the audit breaks down the covert funding channels meticulously. It highlights programs like Engineered Living Materials, or ELM, and PREPARE, which stands for Preemptive Expression of Protective Alleles and Response Elements. These programs are allegedly used to fund the absolute mastery of CRISPR-Cas9 genome editing and the integration of synthetic materials directly with living mammalian tissue. Mastering these highly specific editing tools is the absolute prerequisite for the Chimera protocol. You literally cannot fuse radically different mammalian blueprints without first perfecting the molecular scissors needed to cut and paste that DNA seamlessly. I mean, DARPA doesn't exactly walk into Congress and openly ask for a budget to fund mutants, right? Instead, the audit outlines how they command hundreds of millions of dollars in defense-wide research and development funding to quietly and methodically perfect the precise splicing of mammalian genetics, completely hidden beneath the bureaucratic jargon of defense initiatives. Let's shift into Section 4, Engineering the Servitor class, or what the text calls the Archonic Endgame. So, what is the core concept of this Archonic Endgame? It's a very specific biological fusion. By combining the brilliance of human neuroplasticity and problem-solving intelligence with the extreme physical durability, radiation resistance, and muscular density of animals, the deep state is allegedly engineering the ultimate expendable slave workforce. Now, you might wonder, why wouldn't they just use artificial intelligence or robotics? Well, the audit argues that AI lacks adaptable problem-solving in chaotic, unpredictable environments. AI fails without strict parameters, but human neuroplasticity offers intuitive survival instincts. When you fuse that with a body that can endure extreme physical punishment, it creates an unmatched biological machine. The source details some highly specific applications for these genetically tailored servitors. They would be perfectly suited for the most brutal tasks imaginable, environments that would instantly destroy ordinary human biology. We're talking about deep space asteroid mining in the freezing vacuum of zero gravity. We're talking about toxic environmental cleanup in heavily irradiated zones where the radiation would quite literally melt normal DNA. And finally, deploying them as expendable, fearless, mass-produced combat infantry on the front lines of future conflicts. But the existential horror doesn't stop with the biology. Let's look at Section 5, the patent nightmare and the legal trap of biological ownership. This timeline clinically outlines how the text argues we've actually already surrendered our biological sovereignty. It all starts with a crucial 1980 Supreme Court ruling, Diamond v. Chakrabarty, which legally allowed genetically modified organisms to be patented as human inventions. Now, originally, this just applied to oil-eating microbes. But the true slippery slope occurred in 1988, with U.S. Patent 4736866 granted for the oncomouse, a rodent genetically modified to be prone to cancer. The leap from patenting a microbe to a living, breathing mammal established the exact legal framework that the text argues will pave the way for corporate ownership of a new engineered human-animal species. And here is the massive constitutional loophole highlighted by this audit. If a DARPA front corporation genetically engineers a human-animal hybrid, they alter the DNA just enough so that the entity is no longer legally considered human. Therefore, that being does not possess human rights under the Constitution. Instead, the corporation mathematically owns the copyright to its unique DNA sequence. They can legally own, manufacture, breed, and destroy the servitor class without any legal interference whatsoever. As we picture those sterile white laboratories and the glow of artificial wombs described in the text, we have to leave you with this final, chilling thought from the source material. If they are actively crossing the ultimate red line to patent a chimera today, how long until they attempt to rewrite and patent you? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.